In the sun-drenched landscapes of South Florida, Kevin James, known for his role in The King of Queens and Mall Cop, made headlines with the purchase of a 6-bedroom oceanfront mansion, selling at a staggering $14 million. Kevin thought that this property would promise privacy and exclusivity, but beneath the surface of this lavish purchase laid a complex financial arrangement involving a developer now facing bankruptcy and a scheme that is said to have defrauded over 2,000 investors out of over $650 million. I was pretty surprised that up until now, I had never even heard this story before, and after I went down the rabbit hole, I learned that this whole situation ended up getting much darker than I could have even expected. To understand how Kevin James, of all people, got pulled into this real estate mess, we need to take a much closer look at the company who sold him the house. Today, let's talk about the dark, twisted, and crazy story of how Kevin James got wrapped up in this basically real estate disaster. The home in question is located at 344 North Ocean Boulevard in Delray Beach, Florida, in a small and exclusive community called Sea Spray Estates. The home itself is massive. It's got 11,502 square feet. Inside there are 6 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms. The lot's a decent size at well over a half of an acre. It's got a super private and lush backyard with an oversized swimming pool. The finishes inside are nice. It's definitely got that beachy vibe to it. And I think my favorite room in the house is the kitchen for sure, with the quartz countertops and the double islands. All these photos that I'm showing you guys right now, by the way, are from the last time the home was listed for sale in 2023. It's actually kind of surprising how nice the home looks overall, considering the horribly troubled past that this home has had since it was built. So yeah, speaking of when the home was built, there's a long history here, so let's just kind of spell it all out. The story starts in 2013. This is when a guy named Al Rabel bought the lot, and he hired a company called Seaside Builders to go on and basically build his dream home on the site. By 2016, though, Al sued his general contractor, Seaside, for defective construction. One of the biggest findings at that time is that there was issues with the concrete slabs. It was so bad that later that same year, Al and his family moved out of the house. They said they actually feared for their safety. They had an engineer do an investigation, and the engineer determined that the concrete and bolts couldn't properly support the loads of the home. It got so bad that the city got involved and deemed the home an unsafe structure, saying that nobody was allowed to enter or trespass from that point forward. Anyways, there was a big legal mess between this original owner and the original builder. They kind of sued each other back and forth for a while, but by late 2017, Al decided he had enough and he resold the house. And side note, I'm assuming that Al ended up actually making some good money on that deal too, which is crazy. He got just over $7 million when he resold. It's kind of hard to imagine anybody in their right mind who would spend that much money on a house that has this many known issues, but the buying entity at this time was a group called NOC 344. This was an investment group that I guess found some comfort because they had their own engineer take a look at everything, and they determined that the home only needed around $200,000 worth of repairs to fix the house up and then make it compliant again. Now we're in 2020, and that NOC 344 group does their fix up. They relist the house for sale for $15.95 million, and it kind of quickly resells for the price of $14 million. This is where Kevin James comes into the mix. Kevin is the $14 million buyer of this property that at the time should have been a fixed up, ready to go, move-in ready mansion based on all of those repairs that were recently completed. Although something important to note that we'll come back to is part of Kevin's contract did ask for some repairs to things like the elevator, the patio tiles, and the garage door, which was leaking. What most commonly happens whenever you're buying a house that's got some issues and you want those issues to be fixed is you make that request to the seller, and the seller fixes all of those things before you even close escrow, like before you even get the keys to your new house. But that is not what happened here. What did happen here is that everybody agreed to put $250,000 worth of funds into an escrow account, and this money would pretty much just sit there and not be released to the seller until all of those repairs were completed after Kevin closed on his new house, which was in January of 2021. Well, this is where everything became a big mess because apparently all those repairs were completed by the seller way back then, but that 250 grand was never released to the seller. It was kind of just like held there hostage. And what happened was Kevin James said, hey, don't release that money to the seller. I want that money. That money should be released to me because it turns out that way more repairs were needed to be done to the house than I even realized when we were under contract. To round out our long timeline here, a year after buying the house and then all this drama ensues, Kevin James relisted the house for sale for almost $20 million. And after it sat on the market for almost a year with a bunch of price cuts, he sold the home for $12.675 million, meaning that he lost like $2 million on this property that he lived in for less than a year. Kevin James basically loses his shirt on this deal. That really sucks, but you'd think that'd be the end of the story. It's not. That NOC 344 entity that sold Kevin the house, this was actually an LLC that was tied to a bigger company called National Realty Investment Advisors. That company, National, is in some pretty big heat now, and because of that, now Kevin James' name is being drawn back into this drama all these years later, even after he already sold this house. See, National Realty Investment Advisors was once this high-powered investment firm whose objective was to take your money, invest it into luxury real estate, and then provide everyday investors the opportunity of earning passive income through real estate. Behind the scenes of this company, though, was seemingly a house of cards and one that would eventually collapse in a wild and unexpected way. I'll spare you guys a lot of the nitty-gritty details, but let's just put it this way. This national company was allegedly up to no good. Federal prosecutors say that they defrauded more than 2,000 investors out of over $650 million in what they're calling a Ponzi-like scheme. They weren't just failing to deliver returns, they were taking new investor money and paying off earlier clients while executives siphoned off millions for themselves. At the center of it all was this guy named Thomas Salzano, who a lot of people called the shadow CEO of the company. He's not in the shadow anymore, though. Thomas has been sentenced to 12 years in prison for securities fraud, wire fraud conspiracy, and tax evasion. This was one of those classic Ponzi-style schemes where leadership manipulated financial records to create this illusion of being profitable, but meanwhile, they were diverting investor cash into shell companies and their personal accounts. This is one of those types of crime stories that just completely blows my mind because I can always sort of understand or wrap my head around a situation where there is like one guy, like a Bernie Madoff, who's responsible for a huge financial crime like this. But the fact that there were so many executives involved as well, it just makes me think, how is there not one of these people who kind of raised their hand and was like, hey guys, something doesn't feel right about this? Anyways, in 2022, National filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which meant that thousands of investors, many of them retirees, were left blindsided, watching their savings vanish. But you might still be wondering how Kevin James and that Florida mansion tie into this whole story. Well, remember the whole situation where that $250,000 was put up by this company to do the repairs, and then they did the repairs but never got that money back? Well, that $250,000 is now what's being put into question. It's kind of been wrapped up into this billion-dollar lawsuit. The trustee in the case is saying that they now need that $250,000 released. It cannot be given to Kevin James because if it was released to him, then that would penalize the many creditors who are owed money as a part of the big settlement here. This whole thing really is a big mess, but how these messes are untangled is the trustee is responsible for more or less figuring out who lost money in this whole situation and exactly where all that money went so that some people can hopefully be paid back. They're going to dig deep when they're involved in a case like this, which is why they uncovered this random $250,000 from a couple years ago. When you think about what we can learn from all of this, I'd just say that this case should serve as a bit of a cautionary tale in the world of luxury real estate. You really can't underestimate doing good due diligence. You need to know the history of the home and who the builder was. And even if you're a celebrity, you can become collateral damage in these complex financial disputes. We look at a lot of luxury homes here on the channel, but sometimes the glossy marketing and glamour of these homes hides a mess of permitting issues or bad workmanship, or, as in this case, unresolved legal issues. I mean, think about it. Kevin James didn't build this home. He wasn't the original developer. He didn't even market it for sale, but when the whole web unraveled, his name was dragged into the mix. This wasn't because Kevin did something wrong or anything. It's just that when you play at this level, your name, your fortune, and your reputation even can all potentially end up on the line. This story isn't just about one mansion or one actor or even one company. It's about how easily trust can be weaponized in the real estate game, especially when greed is dressed up as opportunity. For Kevin James, it was a beachfront home that was turned into a big financial burden. For investors, it was a life savings lost to possibly never be recovered again. For the rest of us, I guess it's just a reminder that behind every gate, behind every glass wall, behind every $1 million view, there might be a story that we never even knew was there.